for us. Hi, I'm Stephen Willis with the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and today we're going to tell you why Ole Miss has the best running back in the Southeastern Conference, bar none, period, end of story, and possibly all of college football. Only Blake Corum really can argue with this one way or another. So, Quinshon Judkins is coming back for his sophomore year. Yes, you heard that correctly. After he ran for somewhere in the neighborhood of, 1,567 yards, which is a freshman secondary. Only Herschel Walker is better. That is better than Nick Chubb's freshman mark, but two Georgia Bulldogs, by the way, 1 and 2. That kind of gives you an idea of where they were sitting at the moment. But Quinshon ran for 1,567 yards and 16 touchdowns. Nearly 6 yards a carry. Extremely explosive. While he got a ton of carries, I'm not saying he didn't. He did split carries with Zach Evans, who was the number 6 rusher in the Southeastern Conference, and he ran for nearly 1,000 yards himself. So, Quinshon, if you look down the list, the number 2 running back overall in yards was Rocket Sanders from Arkansas. Good running back, good player. No doubt about that. Not as good as Quinshon Judkins, and I will die on that hill. But he's a good back. I think honestly, the second best running back in the Southeastern Conference last year was probably Ray Davis from Vanderbilt. He played at Vanderbilt, so you didn't hear about him, but he still went over 1,000 yards, which is excellent for any back, honestly. But number 1 was Quinshon Judkins. He led the league, and I expect him to lead the league in rushing again because there's a massive misconception about the Lane Kiffin offense that goes on still to this day. This will be year 4 as the coach of the Ole Miss Rebels, 3 years at Florida Atlantic. So 7 years worth of a sample size of this Lane Kiffin offense. And people still view him as almost an air raid coach, as a throw it around coach. And that just isn't the case. This is a team that has either been 1 or 2 in the SEC in rushing, I think every year since he has been the coach at Ole Miss. And now you're starting to see a stable of running backs consistently get built. Like last year, you had Quinshon, who was the surprise. Now, let's not talk about that everybody expected him to do that. He was a surprise. He was the Kedrick Riscano of the 2022 team. But you had Zach Evans, who, unbelievably talented player. If it wasn't for injuries and not being able to stay healthy, he would have probably gone in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. Injuries and stuff dropped him down as a 6th-round pick. Listen to yesterday's show if you want to know our feelings about that and with the current climate of NIL. But Quinshon, from the beginning, from his first carry last year, I think it was against Central Arkansas or something like that, where you just saw him run and you're like, okay, this guy's different. He's built different. He runs different. He runs unbelievably hard. But you sit here and you watch him over time and you see that his lateral movement is beyond elite. I've told my everydayers this several times, and they can attest to this. But his lateral movement allows him to never take a full shot by the defense. It's almost very Dexter McCluster-like, even though he's over 200 pounds and such a hard runner. But his lateral movement allows you to take a solid hit and turn it into a glancing blow and just turn it into a miss, an arm tackle. And that allows so much running room after contact for Quinshon, even though people know what is coming. I've described this last season, and I very much mean it. Last year's offense was very similar to mid-1990s Nebraska. You knew exactly what Ole Miss offensively was going to do. The question became, could you stop it? And honestly, the question became, could the defense stop it and stop the other team enough to where you could run that offense? Honestly, if we want to be real about what happened, if Ole Miss would have did exactly offensively what they did last year, no change whatsoever. But the defense that Ole Miss had at the end of 2021 was on the field, making it hard for other teams. Ole Miss would have won at 9 or 10 games last year. And it wouldn't have been particularly close. They would have easily gotten there. Maybe only losses to LSU and Alabama or something like that. But the defense kind of let them down. As we know, Chris Partridge is gone. Pete Golding is in. He's putting in his system. This year is going to be clunky. Get ready for it. But Ole Miss has the benefit of having the best running back in the country. And as for Ole Miss, this is a rare occurrence for them. K.O. Dotley held the rushing record for 70 years. And there's some good backs that have come through Ole Miss. Deuce McAllister, Dexter McCluster, BenJarvis Green Ellis, Corey Philpott, Jerry and Ely, Snoop Connor. There's been players that come through here that have been very productive players that have not sniffed K.O.'s record. Well, Quinshawn not only sniffed it, he blew right past it by like 300 yards. So we'll see. If Quinshawn has another year like this year, he will be the all-time rushing leader in Ole Miss football history. I mean, think about that. In 2 years, he did this as a true freshman, true sophomore, and he has a potential to be an all-time, have the all-time rushing record in Ole Miss football history. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. It's at the point where if he has even a remote year to what he had last year, let's just say he runs for 1,200 yards, which I think is possible. I think he could be more effective and rush for less yards and have less carries because the offense could look a little bit different than it has and a little bit closer to 2021. But I think he could end up with 1,200 yards, you know. That's nothing to sneeze at. But in that case, he would be like 200 yards from the career rushing record going into his junior year. So a 1,200-yard season almost all but guarantees he'll be the all-time leading rusher at Ole Miss. And he will be getting ready for his draft year, which, numbers-wise, this year, he was ahead of Jahmyr Gibbs, who went in the first round. And he had numbers comparable to Bijan Robinson, who everybody says was head and shoulders ahead of everybody else in the draft. And they took him in the first round. Quinshawn had similar numbers to Bijan last year. Just kind of is what it is. Best player at his position in college football. And I don't necessarily think, if you're not wearing maize and blue, you can argue this point. Michigan fans can talk to me all they want to with Donovan Edwards and all that. We're going to talk about running back rooms right after the break. But with Blake Corum, although he is coming back from an injury, so it'll be interesting to see what it has. But I think Michigan could argue with Ole Miss back and forth about the best running back room, but nobody in the Southeastern Conference can. And that includes all the 5 stars at Alabama and all the 5 stars at Georgia. It's just the way it is. So we'll see exactly what they're going to do, how they're going to handle it.